Hey everyone, we are back live, and it's we got a lot of good feedback from the first session. We know 2 hours it's long, but I saw it's super exciting. I think to see that many people is enjoying our content, and we are here for another marathon of science of outdoors. So how how are you doing? Who?
Yeah, like you say, it's a marathon. I felt like after the last one, we done one. I kind of just collapsed on the floor for a little bit and had a rest. But that was one of the things we started when we first started this. We talked about was like training your mind in the same way you would train for the for a race and everything. So that's a good analogy, like a marathon of learning.
Yeah, and today we have a lot of different aid stations in this marathon, continuing the analogy, because we have a lot of content. We will talk about the oceans, we will talk about plastic, we will talk about the next generation, the industry. So we have a lot of content for you guys, and we hope you enjoy it. We hope you learn something. So yeah, I think we can go soon to some of this content.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of mini lessons from me. I enjoy running those mini lessons. We've got some interviews and some videos about the outdoor industry and about it's one of the things that's, we talk about calling this the Athlete Climate Academy, but it encompasses so much more. We just needed one little term for it, and climate was it. But like you say, we talk about biodiversity in the last one. We're going to talk about oceans in this one. We're going to talk about races and festivals and how what the future looks like for them. So there's lots to cover in these sessions, right?
It's a lot of things because, as I think we mentioned in the last episode, that is not one solution. It's not like climate. It's not the biodiversity. It's not like pollution. It's like multiple actions, multiple solutions for each of the different topics. So we want to cover all these to find the science that is behind the changes that is Earth is doing. So we need to talk to a lot of people and to find different angles to form our opinion and to form our base of knowledge. So that's the goal of this climate academy, and that's why we are bringing to you all this content and all these experts.
Yeah, and it's really an excuse for me to talk to people about science. So we'll kick it off with some oceans with Oceans 101. All right, let's get into them with a little mini lesson on oceans. Oceans 101, what do we need to know about our watery planet? So, you might have heard that the majority of our planet is water, and that's not technically true because most of our planet is made of different rock types and minerals all underground. But if you look down on our planet from space, it is definitely true that the majority of the surface is covered in water. In fact, 71% of it is. And of that 71%, 97% is ocean, the other 3% being fresh water like lakes, rivers, etc., etc. And more than that, a staggering 99% of all habitable space on our planet is actually in the oceans. Just we can't live there because obviously we can't breathe water. Now, the Earth is pretty weird. We don't actually know of any other planet inside or outside our solar system that can actually hold water in its gas, liquid, and solid forms all at the same time. I mean, we're pretty unique in that respect. The liquid form is arguably the most important of all of these for life, but I mean, they're all pretty important. We don't actually know the full details about how water became so abundant here on Earth. It's made of hydrogen and oxygen, as you may well know, and there would have been loads of that in our early solar system about 5 billion years ago. And as the Earth formed, it would have been way too hot to have had water on the surface. But as the Earth cooled and we developed an atmosphere, that would have allowed water to have pooled on the surface. And there's a few ideas of how water actually got here in the first place. Some theories are based around asteroids and comets hitting the Earth and leaving their water behind. In fact, new science from the Rosetta mission suggests that 10% of Earth's water could have actually come from comets and they left them here. A lot of the science now suggests that the water could have actually come from the same collision that gave us the moon. There's a big Mars-sized body in our solar system, hit Earth, kind of spun off the moon, and then left that water behind in the Earth. And over time, that could have come back out via volcanoes and active plate tectonics and the likes. So that's a really quick history of the Earth 5 billion years or history of the water. And it feels like there's a lot of it, but if you squeeze all the Earth's water down into a sphere, it'd only be around 1,300 kilometers across, so 860 miles. But that's all the water. The stuff that's useful to us, it would only actually be about 56 kilometers across, or 35 miles. That is all we've got to work with. That's all the fresh water on our planet. So our ocean is actually a massive body of salt water that runs right around the planet. It can be subdivided then into Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, and Southern Oceans. And it tastes salty because of the minerals collected by rainwater that runs into the oceans, and also then the minerals under the ocean, like at geothermal vents and the likes. And it harbors a lot of life. Because we've only explored a very tiny bit of the oceans, we aren't actually sure how much life it harbors, but it's anywhere between 50 and 80% of all life on Earth lives in the oceans. And the oceans are a great way that the planet regulates itself. It absorbs energy and moves it around the planet on big ocean currents. And one of the most well-known is actually the Gulf Stream, which runs from the Caribbean along the North American Atlantic coast, across the Atlantic, and it becomes the largest waterfall on Earth as it dives down to the bottom of the ocean off the coast of like the UK and Iceland. And it gives up that heat to Western Europe, making it a lot warmer than we would be without it. So when we think about climate, oceans really should be where we start with the conversation. Ocean temperatures have increased by approximately about 0.13 degrees Celsius per decade over the last 100 years, and about 0.8 degrees since the Industrial Revolution. And the majority of the Earth's rising temperatures have been absorbed by the oceans. It's such a good conductor for heat that they just take on the heat trapped in the atmosphere due to global warming. And since the 1970s, 90% of the excess heat in the atmosphere has been absorbed by the oceans. So as worried as we rightfully should be about our atmosphere increasing in temperature, we should be as worried, if not more worried, about the oceans and the warming in the oceans. It's really finely calibrated to suit wildlife well, and we don't actually know what life can and can't exist in a warmer ocean. And it's also had some larger scale effects as well, because a warming ocean means rising sea levels. Because a weird property of water is that when you freeze it, it expands. And then when you warm it, it contracts all the way to around 4 degrees Celsius. Then when you went past 4 degrees, it starts to expand again, all the way to boiling point. It expands by about 4% between 4 degrees Celsius and boiling point. And a large part of the 8 inches of sea level rise since about 1880 is due to the thermal expansion of water, the water getting warmer and starting to expand. Of course, melting ice will also play a part in sea level rise as well. The ice caps and glaciers that are currently on land are going to contribute. Strangely, the ice that's already in the oceans, like North Pole sea ice, like the Arctic Ocean, that's not going to contribute quite as much because it's already floating in the water. There's a great experiment you can do where you put ice into a glass, fill it with water all the way to the top, and as the ice melts, it doesn't actually change the level of the water because it's already floated in it. So all of this is going to have an effect. It's going to change the salinity of the water, the warmth as well, as the ice starts to melt. It is very complicated, but there are scientists studying it. So as well as the heat in the oceans and the heat that's been taken on by them, they've also been taking on CO2 as well. As you know, if you've ever had a soda, when you mix carbon dioxide then, or CO2, with water, you make it more acidic. And before the Industrial Revolution, the ocean used to actually be a small contributor to CO2. But since then, we've forced it to take on more and more CO2. And in a 27-year study, researchers actually found that the oceans could have absorbed up to 67 billion tons of CO2 between 1992 and 2008, which is bad for a myriad of reasons. The main one, though, is ocean acidification, that changing of the ocean's chemistry. And it's slowly becoming more and more acidic over time. And just a small change in acidity can actually decimate coral reefs and lots of other organisms that actually use calcium carbonate to build their shells. Because the more acidic oceans, it literally dissolves their homes quicker than they can start to build them. So a warming climate caused by burning fossil fuels are changing the temperature, the salinity, and the chemistry of the water. But we also use 4% of the crude oil we collect every single year, and we make plastics from it. And unfortunately, around 8 million tons of plastics escape land and end up in the oceans every single year. So this is creating a crisis on top of the other crisis, which is climate change. Obviously, this has an effect by causing more trash in the environment, but many of the consequences from this we just don't know about yet. We haven't been around or studying it for long enough. And half of the plastic we've ever made has been made in the last 15 years alone. And manufacture is set to increase, set to double by 2050. And what we're finding now is that as the plastics break down, they find their way into every corner of the planet and into every organism on the planet as well, including you. According to research, we all eat around 5 grams of plastic every single week, around the same as a credit card. Depending on the type of plastic and the chemicals that leach out, and we're still not sure what that's going to do to our bodies. There's still more research that needs to be done. But what is important is that we reduce the amount that we create, we reuse what we already have, and we recycle as much as we can. So this crisis that we've got in climate is just being exacerbated by the plastic crisis too. So lots to think about as we go forward with our oceans.
Oh, I learned a lot. I'm a mountain man, so I know a bit about mountains, but like not much about oceans. But that's how connected it is, and why should we protect oceans even if we only love mountains, for example. And talking about like a mountain people that goes to the ocean, like I think our next guest is a friend of mine that he's been doing a lot of things in the mountains, and he went to the ocean to do an amazing experience.
And we were lucky enough for him to send a video across about his Katmai experience, and we'll get straight into the interview straight after that.
So we come from the oceans, and we will talk with a mountain man about oceans again. So I'm pleased to introduce to all of you Max here. He's been a friend of mine for a few years, and actually I met him on the racing scene. He's a talented content creator, beautiful drawer, and he's an amazing editor of films and filmmaker himself. So hey Max, how are you doing?
I'm good, Killian. Yeah, I'm enjoying being back in Alaska for a little bit.
Yes, and actually, we'll talk more about the last trip you did here in Alaska. It's been amazing. But we go back a bit before. How did you start this passion about outdoors? How did you? Yeah, why do you love outdoors?
Boy, that's a good question. I think well, I always grew up on the trails, which is probably a pretty common thing. And for me, content creation and outdoors, I think really started when I was bad at writing and reading, which, you speak like 10 languages, but I can barely speak English. I'm really dyslexic, which means that I struggle to kind of read and write. And so growing up, I really, really, I just struggled to be able to express myself and my passions in reading and writing. And so for me, like watercolors and film and getting outside was kind of how I was able to find that creativity, and trails in the outdoors really just kind of brought that to life for me. It kind of lit that spark, and since then it's just been everything I wanted to do.
That's so interesting. Also, in the way that you went to content creation because because you're dyslexia, and I think that's cool to see how often our formation is so format to do one thing in one way, and probably your dyslexia here has been like a great opportunity to express things differently. And we will go back to content creation, but I think what you are doing, and I believe that content creation it's a great tool, of course, to present the sport, but we are talking about climate here. We are talking about environment, and I believe that art or filming, photography is a good way to share the messages, to share what we feel and what we want to do about environment to other people. How do you think that your work is helping on that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it can feel so overwhelming. Like just climate in general is just such a huge thing, and I think for a while I felt really squashed down by it, especially as a content creator. Like, how do you tell a story that's as big as the entire world? And it's all connected too. And sports are an amazing way to kind of be able to narrow that world down just a little bit and make it a bit more relatable. But when it comes to content creation, like it really all is stories. And just because something is huge and overwhelming doesn't mean that it won't make a great story. Like the bigger the obstacle, the bigger the solution can be. And so from like a climate change standpoint or from a content creation standpoint, we really have this amazing opportunity to tell potentially the biggest stories of our generation, because we're dealing with some of the biggest obstacles of our generation. And so I did, like you mentioned, I did a lot of stories about film and kind of pushing to our limits, but I really kind of stepped more into the environmental side, because I can barely read a book, but I can see a movie and just like get it instantly, you know? And so for me, it's I want to see those stories that kind of can visually capture these really complex, big, huge problems in a way that are understandable to someone like me. And you need content creators from all over the world, all types of art, all types of sports, all types of angles, because it is such a huge topic talking about climate.
Yeah, you got a good point here, and I think it's our goal to with this academy to bring science on to everyone, and it's very hard to read papers, it's very hard to read the studies, and they are super cool, it's amazing, but it demands time, it demands like to have a huge background on science, and with content, with showing a beautiful film with a good message, these ideas they can go straight to our brain, and probably it's a way that we need both. Probably we need the scientists to do the research, and we need the content creators, the divulgators, to pass this message to everybody, and that's something that often the two worlds are too separate, and what you are doing, it's a great thing to bring that together and to translate the scientist's message, the scientist findings into art, into a piece of audiovisual, so it can be easily read or like seen by everybody in their houses. But actually, when I met you for the first time, it was running in Alaska, preparing for a race, and you came to this world like I believe like filming and being more involved with racing. Like you were like doing films and productions on racing. And I hear that a few months ago you enrolled to a trip with a boat in Alaska, trying to find plastics and do research on the plastics in the ocean. So how was the journey from being like filming in races towards enrolling into a scientist expedition?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of funny. I went on one of these trips before I even got into filming races. In fact, as I filmed Mount Marathon, and then the next film I made was about these marine debris. The issue is I never actually finished the film. In 5 years ago, I think it was, for the last 4 years, I've basically been traveling around the world, filming very fast people like yourself, kind of the trail running scene. But before that, I actually went on one of these trips to a place called Kayak Island in Alaska, and we picked up trash for 3 weeks. This is an island with no people on it. Literally, no one lives there. And there were millions of pounds of trash on this, on Alaskan coastlines. And we were just picking up trash for days and days and days and days and days. And it had no end. And it was such a huge thing. And I felt so overwhelmed that I never made a film about it. I tried multiple times and just never could finish a film about it. And I felt really disappointed and really kind of depressed about it, honestly. Oops, art down. I felt a little depressed about it, honestly, because it felt like something that needed, I just couldn't tell the story. And so for the next 4 years, I worked on my art, I worked on filming, I became better at all of that. And then I finally felt ready to go back to these coastlines and maybe try to make a film about this huge, huge issue that is marine debris that almost nobody knows about. Like when we think about plastic in the ocean, we think like this is a water bottle that I found in Kodiak, which is the most recent trip. We went to Kodiak Island. Alaska kind of looks like this. Well, this Kodiak Island is about right here. It's basically Jurassic Park, but instead of dinosaurs, you have bears. Huge mountains, wide fields, beautiful nature, tons of bears, and tons of plastic. So I found this from there. This is actually from Asia. I'm not exactly sure what it says, but you have water bottles, trash. Like here's a little buoy that we found there as well. Even rubber ducks washing up from all over the world, and it's just a bizarre thing because there's almost nobody at these beaches where we're at. Katmai has, I think, 2,200 bears and no people, and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of marine debris, mostly plastic, a whole lot of nets that's washing up on the ocean to these shores. And why it's so scary, and why I think I've not been able to make a film about it for so long because it's so complex, is because it's kind of a ticking time bomb. And nobody really talks about this part, but if you just put a glass bottle on the beach, it'll break apart. Eventually the waves will break it into sand, and it'll be gone. It'll be sea glass, it'll be gone. It's not a huge deal. But when it comes to a piece of rope, maybe, so this is a piece that we found, it frays apart, and I'm not sure exactly what plastic this rope is made out of, but eventually these pieces, you can almost see it. Let's see if I can focus. There we go. You can almost see these little pieces. This rope will break into millions and millions of these little pieces. And not only is that super hard to pick up, because I can pick up a water bottle, that's not hard, but I can't pick up these trillions of small little pieces. But once they break up small enough, they then bioaccumulate, and then they kind of work their way into the ecosystem in my home. And once they're there, you really can't do anything to get out. So we kind of have this limited time frame. There's this race to basically pick up as much of this trash as we can now, before it breaks up so small that we can't pick it up, and then it breaks up so small that it gets into the environment and kind of poisons it from the inside. So at this point, we're just buying ourselves time, because more and more plastic ends up on these beaches in the ocean every year. I think it's something like 8 million tons per year ends up in the ocean every year. I should check that fact, but it's a huge amount. It's mountains of trash, and in order to have a solution, we on the land need to stop creating that disposable waste. So it's this massive, huge, big thing, but it really does come right into my backyard, where you have nobody living on these beautiful, pristine beaches and these ecosystems in Alaska, which are all connected. I'm a mountain person myself. I'm not like a surfer. I don't go on the sea, but they're all very connected. And basically, we kind of have this like limited window to pick up as much of this trash as we can now before it breaks down and kind of starts poisoning the landscape. Because by the time we see the effects, it's going to be too late.
That's a great point you bring out, this connection that often when we talk about waste in the nature, I think it's many people that they think, yeah, it's for aesthetics, like it's not beautiful to see a bottle or it's not beautiful to see a piece of plastic there, but we don't really understand how much when this plastic it breaks into small pieces, into microplastics, that it gets into the environment, it gets to the water, it gets to the plants, and it ends up to the food chain, and we are at the end of this food chain the most often, so it gets into our bodies. So like it's like throwing or like throwing plastic away, we are eating this plastic as. So I think even if it's in these places in Alaska, it will end to the ecosystems, and that's something that you make a good point, that it's everything is connected, and it's not this to take away the plastic that is already there and to not throw more plastic or produce more plastic that goes into a non-circular system. It ends up poisoning the ecosystems and then poisoning ourselves. So during this expedition, you were in a boat with different. It was a team of scientists. It was a cleanup mission. So what were what was the meaning of the expedition you did in the island?
So we were trying to pick up a lot of marine debris, and we picked up 7 metric tons of it in about a week. So we're picking up about 2,000
That's
pounds per day.
insane. That's
And
insane.
that didn't even make a dent. That's the crazy part. Is it's like, I mean, that was just like a tiny piece of the plastics on this beach. But it's important because you do need to remove it. But not only are we removing it, we're on a boat with all these scientists. And like you said, with with media and people from all over the world, this is a huge issue. Climate is a huge issue, and the solution is going to be not one single big solution. It's going to be everybody coming together. And so that's what we did on this boat. We had scientists, we had economists, we had policy professionals, we had public health professionals, and we had me as an artist. And so having all of those people in one place, we're able to kind of make those connections and be able to see, okay, this is something that we can all sort this out. You can't just have an engineer and figure it out. You do need everybody. And so in addition to picking up all of this marine debris, we were kind of talking what it would take to fix it. And like you made a great point. It really is, it needs to be a circle. We need plastic in this world. Like everything, I'm wearing plastic. Most of our lives wouldn't be possible without it. But like you need light plastic to make cars light, so we burn less fossil fuels and things like that. But if we're just throwing this away, it does not break down. Plastic breaks up. It will never break down. And the issue is that it is going to build up, and we're not seeing the effects of this until later. So we were with engineers who know how to recycle it. We're talking to policy people, but more people need to know about this. I never thought I would be an ocean advocate. I grew up in the mountains. I love the trails, but just because I'm not close to the ocean doesn't mean that it won't affect me. It's kind of like, you go to the Himalayas all the time, you're really close to the atmosphere, but that doesn't mean that I don't care about the atmosphere, even though you're much closer to it than I am. It's the same with the sea. The actions of people deep inland, even if you're in like the middle of a country, nowhere close to the sea, your actions could end up affecting it. And ultimately, what happens in the sea will affect all of us. It just might take a while. Kind of like these plastics that are washed up on the shore and are slowly breaking down. And so the hope was to kind of make all these connections, get everybody together, and then start talking about how we can make these solutions. And it's a lot of work still to go. I mean, we didn't figure out the solutions. We're just kind of taking those first steps. But you're right. It will all come back to us. And like, it's gonna affect the animals first. So this right here, this is one of the rubber ducks that we found. This is like a really famous piece of marine debris. This was from a shipping container in Hawaii that went overboard, and all these rubber ducks kind of came up. There's a whole book about it. And so we found one of these. Rachel found one of these on the beach 27 years later. So 27 years ago, this kind of went off a shipping container, basically fell off a ship. But you can see this one has a little hole in it where a bear bit it. So that's a bear tooth mark, most likely. It could be a fox or a wolf, but probably a bear. And so one of the big issues is not only will this affect us eventually, is that it's going to affect the ecosystems and a lot of these animals that don't necessarily know what's going on first. It's going to affect the fish, the zooplankton, the salmon, the bears, and then it will affect us. But if we work hard now, we might be able to stop it before a lot of the damage is done. And I'm really excited for, like, I do a lot of painting and sketching. These are some puffins from the trip. But I'm really excited to be able to kind of use art as a way to light the spark in the same way that the outdoors and trails kind of lit the spark for me as a kid, and hopefully get more people excited, passionate, because we need them to actually find the solution to this. It can't just be a couple artists.
And I think that's a good final point to say that it's not easy solution. I was going to ask you what were the solutions that came out of this trip, but as you mentioned, it's not like just like a magic card that you put out, and it's about like how all together. And you mentioned it was economists, it was artists, it was scientists, it was engineers. So how can all together figure out the solutions? And that's probably what we need to do first, is to be more aware. And I believe that the work that you are doing, we are looking forward to see what you have been filming there, and your drawings are very inspiring on what you found there. To be aware, because we are talking on an island in Alaska. It's not that is the beach where like people are throwing the rubbish, but it's far away. And I have been hearing that it's also like microplastics in the summits in Himalaya, so it's everywhere. So it's not that we throw the rubbish and it stays there, but it moves, it gets into the ecosystem. So I think it's a good point you bring, is we need to unite all together to find solutions and start working now. So thank you very much, Max, for that. And we keep talking because we need to find these solutions and to get inspired by your work to take more action.
Awesome. Thanks, Killian. Yeah, and I would just say, if anybody's watching this, there is room for you. You don't have to be an engineer or a content creator. I never thought that as a dyslexic painter, filmmaker about trails that I would have space, but it will take everyone. And maybe you're watching this and don't think you have a connection to it, but the world is 70+% ocean, and it will take everyone. And I really hope that a lot of people get excited about this, because we need them.
That's so cool. Yeah, everybody have a place, and even if we think that is nothing we can do, we can always do things. Thanks, Max.
Yeah. Thanks, Killian. See ya.
I absolutely love Max. His paintings are wonderful. His work is great, and I connect with him so much because I'm the same. I live through visuals, and I struggle to read books, and I struggle to write anything. It's such a skill to be able to write articles and science papers and everything else, but I really enjoy films and seeing things visually. So for Max to be doing that kind of work is just kind of epic, really.
Yeah, he's good on as you, and I think that's very important to bring science not only on papers, on books, but also on this visual content and on like other formats. It can be like podcast format, it can be like drawings, it can be like visuals, and I think that's how we can get science more accessible, because it's so scarce to get into science, because you get a paper and it's like, what are they talking, like what is this meaning, and it's so cool to have on a very simple way to get the information and to be able to go to tell kids, all people, at least like here, science on a non-scary way.
I'm a big advocate for. I've been pushing universities for a while to mix in science communication and how to easily translate science for the public into their undergraduate programs, because I think is by the time you kind of learn how to do that and how to translate it for the public, by the time you get to like a master's or a PhD, it's too late. We need to be doing that at undergrad level. And to hear Max talk about the oceans, even though you guys are mountain men and as am I, and the fact that it's all connected. One of my friends who's a great science communicator, who actually worked on the Everest paper that found plastic microfibers on Everest. She worked on that. There's a podcast on athleteclimateacademy.com with Imogen Napper, and she worked on that paper. She's pretty great. And they found that as you might imagine, the further you are away from the trail or from camp, microfiber numbers go down and down and down. So, you're right, it's not just oceans, it's all connected. And wherever you go, we find these bits of plastic everywhere.
Yeah, it's as you mentioned, it's everywhere from the top of Everest to the depth of the oceans, and probably like many of us have already plastics inside, and I think it's kind of connected that, and probably in Everest, where the plastic comes from is from gear. Like it comes from like the clothes we use, the tents and all these, that if we don't take it away, it breaks down and it ends on the snow. And so like I think you had prepared something pretty cool about gear.
Yeah, all about gear, all about plastics, and how we go about changing plastics into that gearing. Gear 101. Time to talk about our favorite topic, which is gear. But specifically for Gear 101, we're going to look at plastics and how we create synthetic fibers from plastics. And it might sound a little bit weird if I said I absolutely love plastic, but it is like a really wonderful material. It's durable, it lasts a long time. For the things it was originally intended for, it does the job really, really well. But as humans do, we started using it for things that wasn't its intended purpose, for things that are disposable, and it was never meant to do that. And we kind of got a little bit out of hand, and without realizing, maybe sometimes with realizing too, we've created a plastic crisis that's worldwide. So back 100 years ago, we invented a synthetic version of natural polymers that already existed. So natural polymers could be silk, it could be wood, cotton is a polymer as well, wool too, and even human hair is a polymer. So a polymer is a chain of molecules. You get a molecule and you stack them up against all their friends and you create a polymer out of them. And I said these hang about in nature all the time. We got loads of polymers in nature. But what we realize is that we can create synthetic versions of this as well. So you can get a completely synthetic version of this by combining crude oil and gas. And 4% of all fossil fuel production worldwide goes to creating plastic. So simply put, all plastics are polymers, but not all polymers are plastics. And we need those polymers to create chains to then make things out of. So humans realized that we can create synthetic polymers and make stuff from it. And crude oil at that time was pretty abundant. It just came straight out of the ground. And they started making things like Bakelite, polystyrene, vinyl, acrylic, and loads more, including one called polyethylene. And alongside these new materials, we also became really good at manufacturing them. So polyethylene, or PET for example, was injection molded into plastic bottles. Acrylic was then used to replace glass windows as a safer option, and of course vinyl was used to make records. Other materials started appearing over the next few decades, and combining those new polymers with new manufacturing techniques, they created polyester, satin, vinyl, velvet, acrylic, and of course, I do not need to remind you about lycra and spandex. And it still seems amazing to me that plastics can be made into such a wide array of materials that we can make gear from. Things like skis, even ropes, shoes as well, and things like clothing. Things that are both sometimes hard and soft and flexible and durable and strong. And like I said, it really is a wonder material. But for clothes, how is it compare to what we used to use before, the cottons and the wools of the world that we used to make those clothes from? Well, it's tough to compare products that are made from different materials because they have different impacts on the planet. Let's take a regular t-shirt, for example, that we might buy from an outdoor clothing company. How can you possibly go about calculating its impact on the environment? Well, as usual, scientists have looked into this and done an in-depth life cycle analysis for specific types of clothing. But could you do that for every garment on Earth? Well, it'd be pretty tough. But let's break it down into things like production. So production is a huge factor in all this. In a recent study of cotton t-shirts, they found that 70% of its climate impact came just from production alone. Just one cotton t-shirt uses 2,700 litres of water and more insecticides and pesticides than any other crop in the world. And that's enough water for a person to drink for 900 days. Polyester t-shirts use a lot less water, but they do have a massive impact or high carbon impact. It overtook cotton, polyester did, as the most used fibre on Earth in 2002, and in 2015 it used more than 330 million barrels of oil that was used to create polyester and other synthetic textiles. That's the equivalent of more than 21,000 Olympic swimming pools full of crude oil. So it's by no means better for the environment, but what we're doing here is looking at the full life cycle of all these materials. So in production, which is best? Is it cotton or polyester? Well, that's the thing. It depends on what you're trying to minimize. If you want to minimize water usage, polyester is probably better. If you want to minimize carbon emissions, then cotton is probably better. If you want to reduce insecticides and things like that in our environment, maybe polyester is the way to go. If you want to reduce plastic in our waters, then you've got to choose cotton. And that's all before we've got to the distribution of it all as well. And distribution based on a single plain cotton t-shirt is about 4% of the climate impact of that garment. And that's going to be pretty much the same across the board. Obviously, lighter garments will need less energy to be able to transport them. But it's not just in the transport after the clothes are made, it's also before that too. So cotton grown in the United States, for example, will often be transported to places like Bangladesh to be woven and made into a t-shirt before getting shipped out again. And I say shipped out, it's usually by ship that they're transported around the planet. And compared to trains, trucks and planes, ships are at least the least carbon intensive on the environment. But of course, it has many other impacts on the environment too. So let's get into the care. One load of washing usually uses around 180 litres of water. One load of drying in a tumble dryer uses 5 times as much energy as the wash. And looking at all the other impacts in the process, you can see that maybe turning down your washing machine by a few degrees, it doesn't actually have the impact that we really, really want it to. It's probably contributes less than 1% to the climate cycle of that t-shirt and maybe less. In fact, turning it up by a few degrees might keep your clothes fresh for longer and have less of an impact. It is complicated. And another factor to consider in the laundry cycle is microfibers. Small fibers that are less than 5 millimeters long that wash away in our wash cycles. They also contribute to the microfiber generation in our waterways and in our oceans. Microfibers are one of the major marine pollutants that will end up in our waterways and go into the oceans. And throughout the world, estimating that to date, 1.5 million trillion microfibers might be present in the ocean. And every time we do our laundry, an average of 9 million microfibers are released into our wastewater treatment facilities that they just can't filter out. So here are a few little actions that you could do. If you want, look for organic cotton, if cotton is the way that you want to go. For synthetics, use microfiber bags for your synthetic washes. Don't wash your stuff quite as much. Might be an option. Though for athletes, you have to wash that sweat out of your clothing. You could skip the drying and ironing process for sure to reduce the electricity on that and hang them out where you can, obviously. And then finally, we're on the disposal of all these garments. When they kind of worn away, when they're done, what do you do with them? And this is a tough one because synthetic clothes just aren't easy to recycle, especially if they're a blend or if they're multiple different fabrics all in blocks on the same bit of clothing. But we're finding ways of doing it, and this seems a more environmentally friendly approach if you recycle them. It seems more environmentally sustainable solution than creating virgin polyester. It actually uses between 30 and 50% less energy, reduces the need for primary extraction of crude oil in the first place, and cuts the amount that we end up putting into landfill as well. So it is just better. A lot of companies now are taking PET plastic bottles and making those into synthetic clothing too. And this is great. It keeps them out of landfill, keeps all those bottles out of landfill and puts them to use. And currently around 52% of fabrics that use in textiles is polyester. And around 14% of that is in total is from recycled materials like plastic bottles, which is great. And that number is just going up. But you still have the microfiber problem with these recycled, or should I say downcycled products, because I say downcycled because recycling really is converting something from what it was into something that has the same value. So a bottle into a bottle, for example. And while fleece might have maybe more of a monetary value, it's not really the same as because it's harder to recycle in the last place as well. So what we're saying is that there's no kind of silver bullet with this. And just like everything we've talked about at the Athlete Climate Academy, it's going to take lots of different actions to reach the best outcome that we can hope for. But that is your kind of Gear 101. How do we create a world that has kind of different types of fabrics in them, but we also don't end up really polluting our environment?
Yeah, it's not an easy solution. It's not just like good materials and bad materials, but each of the products has its ups and downs, and we need to probably it's more in the use that we do it, like to keep it longer, to keep it running longer, as you mentioned, like to recycle as possible, or to reuse it in another way, or all these solutions on like yeah, trying to break down the microfiber problem using materials that they don't produce it, or with the washing, with the laundry. So yeah, it's the thing. I think the outdoor industry has a big big role to play on that, on producing better materials that they are more sustainable, but also to educate, I think, the consumers to get a better use on those materials.
I think so. It's a really difficult place to be in because we see like every kid in the world is gonna have an impact. Every person in the world has an impact, and you know people need companies because people need jobs, and they manufacture things, and manufacture can be good. But how do you then go about weighing up like how much manufacture is good? How much do we actually need? How do we go about having less impact? And if you take your impact from this area, you'll probably put your impact onto that area. Like if you want to stop making plastic clothes and move to things like cotton, like carbon emissions goes up and water consumption goes up. And should we then convert to bamboo fleece instead of polyester fleece? And my gosh, it is really confusing, even for everyone. It's really confusing. So one of the things that I'm not a fan of is us putting all that on the consumer, and for them to be like, right, I'm walking into the supermarket or I'm going into the outdoor shop, and I need to think, I need to read a paper, or I need to do something before everything I buy. Shouldn't be like that. I mean, more outdoor companies now are becoming more responsible, and I think it's our jobs and the jobs of athletes like you to kind of push them and steer them in that direction towards being more sustainable.
Yeah, I think exactly that's one of our roles as ambassadors of companies, to just push them all the time. It's like when we are working with designers, when we are talking with the heads of the company, to just say like, we need to do better, we need to do better, and everyone, like as consumers too, like to say to, I think all of the outdoor community, we need to push the companies, and companies are doing improvements. And I think we need to figure out what are the best ways, and but also like together, I think we can be an example as a community to prove that it's possible to have an industry that is more sustainable and to be able to practice on a more current way with our values as people that loves the outdoors.
Yeah, and from a place that's not pointing fingers, that's just transparent, just like holding our hands up, saying we all have an impact and we're trying to do our best. So I spoke to there's multiple outdoor companies that are doing really good stuff at the moment in trying to kind of get to that. But I spoke to Debbie Reed from RAB and Low Alpine about their journey up to net zero. So we're here with Debbie Reed, who's the CSR manager at RAB Outdoor and Low Alpine. Debbie, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. I'm enjoying the fine weather, which makes a nice change for us here in Derbyshire.
Yeah, it does. Like the fine weather is all well and good, unless you're in just a sealed box like I am at the moment. But that is fine. We'll get outdoors later on. So I was really interested to speak to you because you're kind of in the thrall of going on this journey of how to become a more sustainable outdoor company. You've already gone X far, but you've got a long way to go. What are how far have you gone so far with being climate neutral, and what have been some of the trials and tribulations to get to the point where you are now?
Yeah, it's a good question, and instantly you highlight some of the challenges around terminology and how far do we need to go. We decided at the beginning of 2020 to sort of embark on this, it's a cliche, but a journey. It's the easiest way to explain it. And we wanted to understand what our environmental impact was, which for us was around really starting that journey on what does climate reduction look like, how do we calculate it, what do we count, where do we start, what's the terminology. And that's when we decided to go down this route of initially getting to climate neutral as part of a long-term journey to get to net zero. So climate neutral is where we have calculated all of the emissions that we produce as a business in all of our operations, have that verified by a third party, because sadly they don't trust me just to count it and write a number down. They need people cleverer than me to double check those numbers. What we do from then is get that figure verified, and then we balance that amount of carbon we produce with some really great credential offset projects that are again verified, they're very reputable, and they actually deliver measurable benefits themselves. So having calculated our emissions, balancing them against these offset projects, that's what allows us to declare ourselves a climate neutral company. We do that with our partner South Pole. That is part of our journey to net zero. And for us to get to net zero, again, part of the requirement that South Pole will allow us to say we're on this journey to net zero is that not only do we offset and we declare ourselves climate neutral, but we need to have a really good path to get to net zero. So we need a reduction target, we need goals in place, we need to be ambitious, we need to be challenging, and we need to be able to publish our data, and we need to be able to show improvement year on year. So we can't just make a statement, and you can't just rely on my numbers. We need someone else to sort of be checking and double checking our maths and what we're doing.
So a lot of these conversations will be going on at, I would assume, every outdoor brand that there is. Was it how long were the conversations going on at RAB and Low Alpine? And was it a quick decision? I imagine they're not easy decisions to come to say, let's try and hit this target by this point. What if we fail? What about profits, etc., etc., etc.? Was it a difficult thing to do?
I guess quite simply no. We're all seeing the change that's happening out there. So we're all seeing climate change. You know, we joke about the weather, but actually we're experiencing incredible heat in the UK today. Last week I was debating putting my winter duvet back on. And we're in July, so you see those, temperature changes day on day. We hear the news about what's happening in Canada with crazy heat out there. We've got flooding in Northern Europe. So we recognise as outdoor people that this is happening. The playgrounds that we spend our time in, the mountains, the glaciers, the ice fields, the coastlines, we're seeing changes on a daily basis. So we knew as a business we had to do something. It's our business, it's where we spend our time, and it's where future generations are going to need to live. So once we decided we needed to do something, it was more a question of how do we do it. And you're right, it can be totally daunting. You know, we could have sat there and spent a long time trying to decide what to do. We could have gone to lots and lots of different people, and we could have taken the next 3 or 5 years coming up with project plans and making sure we got the right answer. We decided that we had to act now. So actually what we did was make a decision and act on it. Calculate our data, make the choice to get to climate neutral, make this ambition to get to net zero, and know that we've probably not got it right, but we would rather act now and start doing something today than wait until we've got everything absolutely right and then miss all these days, months, years of opportunity that we can't afford to, quite frankly.
It's one of those things that we've seen, well, with a pandemic, right? Like it's a day at the start is worth a month at the end. And I feel like it's the same with climate change, that we just, we need to take swift action now. And like you say, it doesn't need to be completely right. Like we're going to get stuff wrong, but swift action is going to save us a lot on the back end. And it's one of the things that we've talked about within the Athlete Climate Academy, and we'll talk about going down the line is, we have to take that action quickly, not to stop climate change. That's happening. Like, we can't get away from that. But to mitigate the ramifications of it that we'll eventually have to deal with. And the parallels between the pandemic and climate change are vast. And I hope that we learn from it. So you've learned on your journey now to climate neutral. What are you going to take into your next journey? So RAB want to go 2030, net zero. What is net zero, and what have you learned so far you can put towards that next decade?
Yeah, one of the things we've learned is this is way too complicated. And I think trying to communicate and engage to people has been one of the really, really challenging things that we've done. So in terms of what we've learned, it's to try and talk more simply about things, to try and be more open and more honest about what we're doing. So you'll see, on our website, we've just tried to break it down into almost bite-sized chunks for people to understand. But that journey to net zero is about us now taking the data that we've calculated from our climate neutral position, year on year, coming up with reduction activities to reduce those emissions. And essentially, we're trying to eradicate every piece of unnecessary carbon emissions that we're producing as a business until we get to the point that there is only the absolute essential emissions left that we absolutely need to run our business, that are totally unavoidable. Once we've got to that point, we can offset those using only removal projects. So removal projects are the ones that actually remove carbon from the atmosphere, like forestry or moorland projects. Once we get to that point, that's when we can be declared net zero. But that requires a whole heap of activity between now and then. Some of the things we know we can do, so, minimising the impact of our packaging, minimising the impact of some of our materials and replacing virgin with recycled materials where we can. Some things we just don't know yet. The technology's not there, the government infrastructure's not there, so we haven't got all the answers. But as I said before, we know we can influence and change the things that we can. We need to do that first. And one of the things we've built into our programme is almost a pause and reflect moment in 2025, where we will stop, look at where we've got to, look at how the whole environment has changed since then, and then refocus and hope then that there's some innovation, there's more government influence, there's more creativity, there's more partnership working, and actually that will help us in those next 5 years. And if I'm honest, it might take us another 8 years from then to get where we want. We might get there quicker. We don't know. But we need to start somewhere and just influence the things we can now.
And it's so daunting how complicated it is. Climate change is one of those, I think one of the reasons it's taken us so long to kind of get to grips with it, I still don't think we have totally got to grips with it, is that it influences absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. So, you talk about some of the things, some of the strides you've made so far, and whether that's in, the recycled down that, putting into the microlight jackets, or, in the outdoor industry, I see polybags being used quite a lot. That's something we can change. And you might think that, polybags, plastic ends up in the ocean. So that's how it's damaging the environment. But plastics are made from fossil fuels that come from crude oil, that come from the ocean. So, there's always a link back, and it's always climate change. There's always that thing. So I think that you're right to kind of go on that journey and take it step by step, because this technology is moving so quickly. Carbon capture is moving really quickly. What we can do in new materials. We talked about bamboo fleece instead of plastic fleece. How do you think the outdoor industry is going to start to embrace those new technologies going forward?
So I think there's a lot that's happening already. And you talk about sort of just plastics there with things like polybags. Us working together as an industry to not eradicate polybags, but to use them and treat them as a valuable resource, not a waste product. And I think that's one of the things we need to do as an industry, is look at where we currently have waste that we should be treating as a resource. So if we can use polybags for what they're designed for, to protect our garments, the environmental impact is in the damage of those garments, not in the 11-gram polybag. But at the end of the polybag's natural life, so when it gets to the retailer outlet, we want to then save it and recycle it, not allow it to get into the rivers and the coastal areas that we absolutely don't want it to be. But if we capture it and reuse it, as an industry, we can have a huge influence on the recycle and circular economy of polybags. So a really, really simple example, but I think there's things as an industry we can absolutely be doing. I mean, you touched on things like, recycled down. We started using recycled down last year. There's absolutely no quality difference between the recycled down that we're using and the virgin down that we previously used. We're saving that from being a waste product filling up landfill. So, there's a win-win there for us. And we're already seeing many of our partners, our material partners, are already developing new products, new biomaterials, bioplastics, more and more recycled materials. Zips and trims are something that we're starting to see, more and more recycled material coming through there. It's going to take time. And one of the things, our brands, one of the things we won't compromise on is the technical performance of our products. So we won't ever downgrade our products in order to use a more sustainable material, because for us the most sustainable product is the one that actually performs to the level that you expect it to. So we'll work with our partners until we get that right quality level, and that's when we'll put it in our products, hence the Microlite and the Pure Down example.
I think that goes back to the essence of what it is to be an outdoor manufacturer and trying to achieve as much of like net zero as possible, because you can't ask people to go into the Alpine and wear stuff that's compromised. It's just not right to do. So taking as much carbon from your workflow as possible is the right thing to do until you come to a point where you say, right, we can't trim any more off. And I don't think anyone's going to be pointing at these companies in the outdoor industry and say, well, you haven't got to complete zero carbon, like no carbon emissions. I think everyone knows, like, manufacturers manufacture stuff like plastics and carbon and other things. They come from that. But it's all that extra stuff on top that we could do so much more to take away, that whether it's for profit or for the work of it, or maybe ignorance. And I don't use ignorance as a bad term. I'm ignorant of lots of things, but perhaps we just don't know that we could be doing better, right? The outdoor industry could just be naive to all that. Do you think it is, or do you think it's something else?
So I think one of the things that helps the outdoor industry is our consumer base, who are actually pretty passionate, pretty educated, pretty challenging. They keep us on our toes. So we can't afford to get slack. You look, back through the years, things like the responsible down standard was something which the outdoor industry adopted at one of the earliest points. And then you look at, other industries have now followed suit. Things like the Microfiber Consortium, that originated from the European Outdoor Group. We're all members of that, and now you've got other fashion houses now joining that group. the Single-Use Plastics Group, also run by the EOG. So I think as an industry, we're constantly challenged by our consumers. So that stops us becoming complacent. On a daily basis, we're being challenged about, whatever was in the news yesterday, how are we reacting and responding to it? There is a challenge for us to communicate that back and not just assume that our consumers expect we're doing the right thing. So for us to be able to relay back and, whether it's, a session like this, whether it's, we run sort of things like breakfast sessions, trying to speak to retailers, trying to speak to the industry, press releases, websites, social media, but trying to reassure consumers that these are the things we're doing, and we're doing them with best intent, with the information we have today. And as we all know, things change on a daily basis, but all we can ever do is the best that we can do today based on the information and facts we have to hand.
So going forward over the next 10 years on your journey, and don't give away any trade secrets from Rab, but what do you think are going to be the big changes in the outdoor industry? What kind of new tech is coming through that you think is really interesting? Is there a new type of material you think is going to pave the way in a different way of thinking about stuff? Like I say, don't give away anything too secret. Better have got anything for us.
Yeah, no one's watching this, are they?
No, probably not, actually.
I think for us, and this is an industry challenge, it's end of life product. We really need, as an industry, to understand how we're going to address end of life. We have a product coming out this next season, Arc Eco Jacket, a sort of waterproof jacket. It's made of a monopolymer material, 100% polyester, designed to be recycled at end of use. Challenge we've got is we haven't really got many locations that you as a consumer can go and recycle that product yet. Right. If I wait until we have the right recycle technologies around, then we've had another 5 years worth of that jacket being on the market. So we're currently designing product, even though for an end-of-life solution that isn't quite there yet. We know it's coming, we're working with partners and there's testing and we know it's there, we know it's proven. There's just the availability and the cost at the moment stops it being at every street corner. But that's the sort of thing I think where as an industry we need to be working together, because we have to be developing now for that end of life. But we need support externally as well for research, funding, availability, that technology improvement. So I think that's really one of the big things. You see a lot at the moment around higher systems, lease systems. I think there is possibility for that, but it's got to be the right products in the right marketplace. And probably the right consumer as well. I'm not sure the consumers are quite ready for that yet, so there's a consumer push there. And the other thing which we've started doing, and I know a number of other brands are doing as well, is really starting to look at how can we repair and resell products which maybe aren't first quality products. But actually, if you repair them in such a way, you make them unique and you add value in that way. So we've launched our second stitch products in local markets for now, but they're working really well. And I think that continuation of encouraging consumers to continue to love and have that emotional attachment to their products. The most sustainable product is the product you already own. So actually, how do you prolong the life of that? And I think we're going to see more and more examples of that, different ways of prolonging life, extending life, and actually different end-of-life solutions. I think that coupled with the material development that we are seeing, and there's lots of amazing, creative, innovative materials coming through, but we kind of need all these things to align. We need all those planets to be lined up to get to the point where consumers are comfortable buying new products and know that whole life cycle has been considered.
Well, as an astronomer, I appreciate that analogy of the planets lining up. But I think you've hit the nail on the head where you say solutions to these problems are never going to be one thing. We look for silver bullets in things, and we look for a solution that's just let me buy that thing, or let me do this way, and it'll all work itself out. But in the outdoor industry, in life in general, it's going to be such an amalgamation of lots and lots of little tiny things that end up doing something good, I think.
Yeah, I think it's all of us taking accountability and responsibility as well. I think as a brand, we absolutely have to. I think as a consumer, I have to think about what I'm buying and do I need it and how long will I have it for and what happens to it and how will I treat it through its life. I think retailers need to think about how they are encouraging and supporting that journey of a product. So I think we've all got to take that accountability. We can't, I think you mentioned it earlier, we can't just finger point at each other. This is about us all having a sort of shared behavioural change to address these challenges.
I certainly agree. Debbie, good luck on the next decade, your journey towards net zero. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much. I'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Take care.
That was good. It was a good explanation of what brands can do, and like also that it's many things that we don't know yet how it will change the market. Probably it's not only like the products to be more sustainable, as we said, that it's an important point, but also how we will use these products, how we will like buy it or rent it, or like different models on like the life and the use of those products. So it was very interesting.
They talk about that a lot in the electronics world at the moment. Like if you buy a washing machine, for example, like should you own it or should you effectively lease it off the manufacturer? And then at the end of the life, it goes back to that manufacturer to be converted back into other products or recycled or whatever. Because the thing of ownership, like if you own something, it's then your responsibility to do something with it at the end of its life, right? So should we be effectively kind of leasing the products off the company and then it goes straight back to them? I know there's multiple companies now that are doing some wonderful things, including Salomon, who've just put out the Index 01, where now you can, the bottom of they can take it apart and then it goes back to the company and then I guess recycled or downcycled into ski shoes. So this idea of ownership and what you do at the end of life is very complicated but very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have been talking, actually, I feel that we has been touching a lot of subjects from like on Tuesday and today. We've been talking with a lot of different people from very different backgrounds, but like all of them are like middle age. Like it feels like we are all like
yeah, I'd go with that.
Old guys, but yeah, we are like all middle age, and we are the generation that we are living now. But I think it's also important to see what's the next generations thinking about the world that we are living to them.
Yeah, because the next generation are the ones that are changing, the kind of like the greener generation. They're changing things, but when it comes to what you're going to do in the future, whether that comes to buying stuff in the outdoor industry or that events, like what are the future of festivals and events and things like that? Are the new athletes going to be going towards those? Are they going to be saying, I don't want to go to those events because it means I have to fly around the world? It's a difficult one to think about.
Yeah, exactly. We got a good conversation about that.
Yeah, so this is a conversation with Seb Salisbury and Katie. Careful for the bad language, Killian.
So we have been talking with a lot of scientists, a lot of athletes that actually they have a very interesting point of view about very different topics, from biodiversity to climate to the industry. But what I feel is that we are talking with guys that they are my age or older, so we are like talking with the ones that we have been creating the problem, or we have found the problem and we see, okay, what to do now. But I believe that it's important to talk with the next generations, the guys and girls that they will that they found this problem and that they will need to solve, because probably your generation, we were a bit too late. We did not the job for it. So we are just passing all this shit to those kids. And I'm very sorry for that, Sebastian and Kate. But I think if we are in the hands of people like you, we are in a good direction. So first of all, thank you for joining us. And just to start, like a small introduction of who are you, what you are doing.
Okay, so I'm Sebastian, obviously. I'm 15 years old. I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. And as I said before, running has always been a thing for me. I've always loved the nature and the outdoors. And just they basically growing up, it was my backyard. I feel like through the years of my running career, um, I've inspired people younger than me to go get outside and start trail running. And that's really special to me to know that I'm the reason that they're out there having fun. Through my life, runs and hikes as a youngin started to become longer runs. And then, as I said before, I did my first ultra when I was 9 years old. And when I was 13, I actually became the youngest qualifying finisher for the Western States 100 at Black Canyon 100K. So that is something really special to me also. So to sum it up, I'm just a 15-year-old ultra runner that is very interested in the sport and wants to keep doing it forever, and a believer of climate change and to help stop it from happening.
So my name's Katie and I'm from Essex in the UK, so that's kind of near London. And I study outdoor adventure in sports at college. And yeah, similar to Seb, I'm sort of a distance runner, but I do a bit of everything because obviously down south it's very sort of track and road based, which I enjoy as well. But the distance in the mountains is obviously where it's at for me, I think. Similar to Seb in the aspect that going sort of to places like the Lake District and the Peak District, if some of the people from the UK are familiar with those, but yeah, sort of bringing that sort of like me running in those places and then coming back down south, people were seeing that, and yeah, it's just really great to know that I'm sort of helping people that sort of don't really see the outdoors now, if that makes sense, because living near London, a lot of people are quite sheltered from that sort of stuff, and then they don't really realise what the effects of climate change are actually doing to places like that because they've never been or experienced places like that before. Yeah, and I think obviously studying outdoor adventure, I just love the outdoors, anything and everything. I mean, cycling, swimming, anything in the outdoors, it's where it's at. It's a place to be. Yeah, that's kind of it for me, really. Pretty much everything.
Yeah, I think all of us like feel this connection with the outdoors and with nature, and that's something very special that we are lucky to enjoy. And as you mentioned, probably the athlete career has helped you to get closer to this environment and to this nature, and probably to take more conscience about that. Yeah, we need to preserve it. When and how did you get concerned about climate change, the loss of biodiversity? These things?
I knew it's always been around. I think ever since I was young, obviously watching the news, I think it's something that's always been there, but never something that's actually become a concern to me in particular until I think when I really started studying about it. I mean, studying about things such as you say, biodiversity, the lack of systems that we have that have been put in place to support it, I think really had a massive effect. I think as people my age, where I live, they are very aware of climate change. There's a lot of protests that go around in London that the youth sort of start. But yeah, I think coming from an education point of view, it's definitely something that I've sort of gained more knowledge about.
When I first kind of saw it actually happen to me in real life was kind of like Katie, just kind of seeing it on the news for a while, like it's there. But basically I grew up running obviously on my local trails. Like I had like a good 6 of them that I ran on for 8 years. And then the Thomas Fire happened, which burned 500,000 acres of like land all around California. And I thought all those trails were going to be gone forever. So and then a few months after that, there was a terrible mudslide that killed a bunch of people that lived in my town. So it was just, and that was out of nowhere too. So it was really crazy to see that. It was definitely an eye opener.
Yeah, it seems like listening to you, it seems that at your age you are way more educated about climate issues than I was at your age, or even like at 20 years old. And that's something that I think that your generation is much more prepared on taking seriously the measures that we need to take to fight it. And how, because I has been practicing outdoor sports for all my life, and I has been like probably just enjoying the dream, like not really thinking about the consequences of these lifestyles. And you, as a young athlete, that you have like all your career in ahead of you, like, do you think like do you take into account like that like climate issues or the footprint of your activities when you practice or thinking about 10 years from now, how these will affect your activities?
Trees Not Teas, that movement, things like that. Do you know the ultra runner Dan Lawson? He's a British guy, I think, and yeah, he created a brand called Rerun, which obviously is recycled running gear that people send in and then they resell or they recycle. I think things like that and things like people not actually accepting t-shirts and like the end of races and consciously making the effort to go the extra mile to make sure that they reduce their carbon footprint, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it seems is that yeah, like it's these things like it take like a lot of years for me to understand like the importance of like not like yeah to do these things and you have that from a very young age, like you are doing all these actions and being conscious, and that's something that it will accelerate for sure. And as I said before, like we are sorry to give that problem to your generation, but as I mentioned, like you feel much more prepared than us for that because the education that you had. But what are you more concerned about, like climate change, the biodiversity, the pollution? What's the thing that is really like? Is it scaring you? It's you feel scared about that, or it's just like something that is like, oh, it's there and it's just there.
I try to not be scared by it, because I feel like I don't know, I feel like that's just wouldn't do well for me, but it's definitely there, and I'm not one of those people that just thinks that it's nothing. I definitely know it's there, and I want to help try and prevent that by reducing my carbon footprint, just trying to do everything I can to avoid that in the future.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it is something that does very much frighten me. I think not to the point where it's kind of like stresses me out, but I think there is a fear in the back of my mind. It's just things such as things that are kind of innocent that can't fend for themselves, like animals, sort of everything in the rainforest, the biodiversity. I think it was something like the rainforest holds 90% of the world's biodiversity, which is really sad to think that their home is literally being destroyed for our personal benefit. But yeah, I think it's something that does genuinely scare me and yeah, puts a lot of people in danger when they're not careful and they don't think about sort of what they do.
Yeah, and that's yeah, that's scaring me. But I'm an optimistic in life, so I think like we can fight, we can solve these problems, and it's hard to picturize how will be like outdoors in 15 in 20 years from now. Like I have been changed, like I am 34 years old, and I have been seeing like how mountains has changed in this time, and we see that now it's accelerating. So what do you think it will be different in that time, like when you are in your maturity as athletes?
Yeah, it's really hard to say because I think the future is so unpredictable. But as you say, I mean, glass half full, not glass half empty. I'm quite optimistic that people like obviously me and Seb will make sure and crack down on the fact that people will reduce their carbon footprint. Whether or not, I think a big thing would be trying to do it without people that don't really take it into consideration that much, without them realising, because I think it's the little things that really do add up. And I think racing wise, if big organisations and stuff take their responsibility and take matters into their own hands about how they deal with sort of their their carbon footprint, then that will have a sort of a ripple effect on everyone that is involved with their events.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. Like how we need to change probably how we have been living, all of us, and change our lifestyles so we are more sustainable. And I believe that's something that we haven't been doing. We have been just not taking environment into account on any of our activities, and it feels that you are doing that from now, and that's something that we really appreciate, I think, because we feel that we are in good hands for this. And what's the compromise that you are going to take on that? Like let's say like on terms of traveling for competitions, or like lifestyle, like food wise, shopping. Do you feel that okay, maybe I could do all these, but I don't want because it's not good for the planet?
Well, my family has always done just like car trips. We drive pretty much everywhere. Like we just drove to Colorado from Santa Barbara, so that was like 17-hour drive. But yeah, definitely just not doing it as much would definitely, like this like the small things that each person can do a little bit less will have a great impact on like the whole world's well-being in terms of climate change. Um, I mean, in terms of like going to competitions and stuff, it really just depends on how big of like if it's like a huge national championship and I have to fly there, then of course I would. But I feel like just flying around, like if you can drive there, I think you should just drive because it uses a lot less pollution, for sure.
Yeah, so similar to Seb, I think making the conscious effort to try and put things in place to reduce your carbon footprint, and that would obviously be very beneficial. I think personally, I tried to go vegetarian a few weeks ago because that was a big thing for me. Obviously, being a sort of animal lover, it was massive for me to at least try and become sort of predominantly vegetarian, but I just became anemic. That sounds really bad, but yeah, it's not that bad. But yeah, I do think I did need meat in my diet, but now I just like to sort of stay predominantly plant-based, but I do have meat in my diet. But I think as long as I'm still making that effort without sort of having too much, if that makes sense. But yeah, making that effort for me and doing what's right for me, but still, yeah, trying to reduce my carbon footprint as much as possible. I think traveling wise to races and stuff, I'm not too sure, to be honest. I think, as Seb said, it really does depend on the race, times as well, and yeah, just everything like that, I think. Yeah, I mean, me and my dad drive around in his like converted camper van, and I mean, that's probably not very fuel efficient, but I think it would probably save a lot of, because we run that off solar. I think, yeah, most of his van runs off solar, like we power his
Awesome,
fridge. Yeah, we have a little TV as well. It's pretty cool. But yeah, we drive that to many places and like races. Like we keep that there, and then we drive to like the Lake District or the Peak District and do it in that, rather than driving, staying at a hotel, and then yeah, like driving back. So I think yeah, just everyone doing their little part and making the effort would really have a good effect.
Yeah, that's good points that you are bringing here. And just to finish, like now you have a audience full of athletes and people probably more on my age than yours. And what should we do? Like, or what should we do to try to live these mountains and these outdoors a bit better for you to be able to enjoy it? What would be your message for all of us?
Where I'm from, everything seems to be pretty good, but I know around the world, it's just a lot of pollution, like around the trails. Like when I go out, like when I do certain races, the race directors will be super clear on picking up stuff after you, and I'll still see water bottles on the ground, like goo gels on the ground, and it's just I always pick it up and put it in my pack because it's just like those little things that you can do. Like it really doesn't take that much work to just pick something up and put it in your pack. But yeah, I mean, just cleaning up after yourself on the trails. I mean, I know the mountain biking community is really good at that, because certain trails are mainly just for hikers. So when certain trails are allowed for mountain biking, they make sure to do really well cleaning up after themselves, and that we really like when I feel like, yeah, I mean, just the little things, like I said, picking up after yourselves on the trails will really go a long ways.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Seb, I think just people thinking before they actually do things. Like, I think a big thing, especially for people my age and teens, especially, just thinking like shopping wise of fast fashion, thinking to yourself, do you actually need that? Or is that just something that is just there? I mean, for me, I like to put it back and then like forget about it. But if I can't remember the actual like item, then I probably didn't need it or want it that bad in the first place. So I think everyone just thinking about before they take that step. And yeah, I think that stems even further with sort of bigger organisations and sort of hire people to think before you actually put things in place and yeah, do things. Because a lot of times there is a chance for, especially bigger brands, to take more responsibility for what they are doing. Like, I think, I can't remember who else was in the podcast, but they were saying about how is it actually truly like good for the planet, or is it a marketing thing to make them look good? I think that's a big thing. Actually, do people individually doing their research and yeah, looking at the details behind everything before they go into it, because a lot of the time it's a big marketing ploy. Yeah.
That's super good points that you make here, and we will make sure that all the guys listening, they are taking advice on that. And yeah, thanks for the conversation, and very good luck for the next. I believe that you have a great career ahead of you, and hope to see you soon in some races.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And thank you guys all very much and thank you especially Hugh for inviting me here. It's been really great talking to you guys.
I got a little shout out there at the end as well. You mentioned that at the end we'll see you soon in some races, and you talked a lot about. And thank you, Seb and Katie, for just being absolutely great. But that part of the conversation was, are you going to go to those races? What if that race is on the other side of the world? Isn't that? How have you been thinking about your races? I mean, you're a prolific racer. How have you been thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one subject that I had thought a lot in the past years, and like I did some years with a lot of races. Like some years it was like 52, 55 races during the year, doing Eskimo and trail running. So that means like every weekend it was kind of a travel. Mostly it was in Europe, so it was by car, but it was also a lot of long travels, and many of the races, it didn't feel like I didn't feel that excited about the race. It was just okay, I have the possibility to go there, so I go. And lately, I think I have saved only to go to these races or to make a travel to these races or projects that it has a big meaning, and all the other ones to cut it and to just do races locally. So all what's training races, or if it races just to do it or to be in shape, or to that it don't have a very that it's not the feeling like okay, this is the goal of the season or the two goals of the season, then it's like not worth it to take a plane for me. And also it's easier to make this decision after like having done a lot of racing for many years. But also like I think we put a lot of times the guilt to the individuals, like don't travel that much, don't do that, and like I think companies and governments and all the financial have a big role to play. It's of course like as individuals we need to do like Katie mentioned, like to turn like a plant-based. That's something that it's like for me, I don't like meat the taste, so it's very easy to be vegetarian. But like as she mentioned, like
and you've got your own little farm as well, so
yeah, that, or downgrade
A little
the
veg.
downgrade the intake, and but also like think about as we mentioned the other day about where we put our money, the banking, the then like voting, and I think it's important to do individual actions, and that should be something that we feel comfortable with doing it, because if it takes that much, like of course we need to make an effort, but if it takes that much an effort that is not sustainable for us to keep it, then probably it's not worth it. But it's important to try to do our best and to feel comfortable with the decisions we are taking.
But also, like you say, that Katie and Seb are just starting out in their careers, and I imagine they'll do really well. But there must be pressure coming down from everywhere to, if you want to be the best, then you've got to prove yourself. You've got to go to these races. You've got to win all the high-profile ones. You've got to go here and be filmed here and do these things. So there's got to be pressure coming down from everywhere. That if you want to succeed, if you want to be, if you want to succeed, then you've got to be seen doing these things. So it's really difficult.
It is, and especially when you are a young athlete or at the beginning of your career, like it might feel that, okay, you have this goal and you want to prepare the race very well, but then like the sponsor wants you to go to this other race, or like the club or that. You don't feel like saying, hey, I will not do it. Like I feel like very comfortable to say it now, but not like 20 years ago. And that's part of it. So I think it's good that they race and they do all that, but also I think athletes should be more empowered to be able to take those decisions by themselves, and of course, like you want to explore, and I think traveling, for me, visiting different places, visiting different problems, and because we often have a very central opinion of the problems locally, like what's going around me, and that's but if we travel, if we meet with people coming from very different backgrounds, we understand that those problems, those issues, and how people see the world is very different from place to place, and that's important for also changing our opinions to build like a larger vision. So I think like it's not that travel it's evil. I think it's the opposite. Travel, it really helps to understand problems globally and to be able to create connections to solve them. It's of course we need to find better solutions, more sustainable solutions for traveling, but also I mean, like, we can cut a lot on other things and not make only traveling as the single level.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I love most about the athlete community is exactly that. It's the community around it, and a lot of my travel is done to different festivals, whether that's talking about science or whether that's film festivals and the likes. And one of the things, obviously the travel is part of that, but then the actual event or the festival itself has an impact on the environment. So that's one thing we've got to think about going forward. And I know the Kylian Jornet Foundation has made strides into what can trail events do when it comes to minimizing the impact once the racer is at the actual event. But the same with festivals, like the Kendal Mountain Festival. This next interview was with Steve Scott, who's from Kendal, and I really wanted to chat to him about what can a festival do to minimize this impact, not eradicate it, because it's going to have an impact, but what can they actually do to minimize the impact on the environment? Steve, it's so nice to chat to you again. We talk every year around about November when you're in the throes of the Mountain Festival, and it's always kind of a glance-in chat before you have to run off somewhere else and do something else. But you, along with many other people, run Kendal Mountain Festival. And I noticed over the last few years you're just pushing more and more towards a more sustainable festival. Do you want to tell us, before we get into that, what is Kendal Mountain Festival and how long has it been around, and what is it?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Hugh. Well, Kendal is a huge platform now for lots of different communities from lots of outdoor communities who come together every November to celebrate what's important to them in the outdoor environment. Kendal is at core a film festival, an international film festival. We have 15 to 20,000 people come to the event every year. And it was 40 years old last year. We have obviously had a big party planned last year, but something put a stop to that for all of us, didn't it? So we ran the festival online last year for the first time as a broadcast event. But yeah, it's a difficult one to explain. For those people that know Edinburgh Fringe, the arts cultural festival every year in Scotland, it's very much like the Edinburgh Fringe of outdoor. You know, we have literature, we have the arts, we have obviously film, we have guest speakers, huge roster of guest speakers. You know, we have music, we have panel debates, obviously science with yourself, lots of community outreach programs. It's cliche.
A lot of education programs as well.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of education, and that's becoming more and more prevalent. So yeah, it's a huge event. It really is, and it touches. It has sort of lots of webs of influence, if you like. You know, it very quickly expands into lots of different communities, which is, you know, great to stand back and watch.
And it's one of the things that I've loved about Kendal for years, and I always find it a privilege to come up and used to be to come up and do it or do it remotely as it is currently. But it's an audience that is there that used to be there for adventure and films and mountains, but also there for things that like you say, like science and education, and to become more informed about things. It's never just what's the furthest, the fastest, the biggest. It's always like that idea of our impact on the mountains has always been part of Kendal, I feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're sort of mirroring the shift in society, and we have to. You know, we have a responsibility there to do that. And you know, maybe in the early days it was very much about mountaineering expeditions and you know, the core communities and the sort of pinnacle, excuse the pun, of achievement. But you know, that really is still important. You know, I can't negate that. But also, I think society and certainly our audience, they expect a lot more out of Kendal now. They expect us to talk about climate change, about sort of closed loop manufacturing, you know, what the brand partners are doing. And I think we've moved from a very sort of passive role to be more active or proactive.
And was that a conscious shift? You remember, like in, I don't know, 2011, we went, okay, now we're going to change up and move across, or was it like an organic change over time?
That's a really good question. I think the shift was slightly forced, if I'm being honest. A few of us in the team have had to make some difficult decisions about programming, about platforming content, and we've had some criticism. You know, in the same breath that we're working on a few panels with inclusivity and diversity, and obviously reflecting what's happening in society today with Black Lives Matter, with gender balance, with, you know, sexual orientation, and talking about these topics within the you know, the realm of outdoor and the outdoor industry. It was never done before. You know, it's predominantly, you know, very male dominated, very white, very middle class, and I think we're pulling in these conversations and areas of discomfort that I think need to be addressed. And if we can be a beacon of, you know, representation, then, you know, we're trying to do that. And we're not perfect, but we're definitely a long way on that road. And I think people are really noticing that now. Probably last year more than ever when we went global with our broadcast event.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that has cropped up time and time again in the Athlete Climate Academy is the idea of transparency and not blaming people. Like, you know, we talked about like every festival, every manufacturer, there's going to have some kind of impact on the environment, and adventurers who travel around the world, who, you know, if you want to go and climb in the Himalaya, then you have to probably take a plane to get there. And we get a lot of pushback on that, saying, well, if you're an environmentalist, if you really care about the environment, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't have this impact. And I think we're moving to a structure now where we're saying, right, we hold our hands up, we have an impact. Let's find out what that impact is, and let's try and sort it out together. You know, it's a very open and honest discussion. So did you think about, were there like surveys done to say, right, what impact are we having on carbon emissions? What impact are we having on plastics? What impact are we having on on the business around Kendall itself, or did you just jump in and say we're going to try and change up and it's obvious we're just going to try and be better?
Look, I think, you've always got to operate within your own skill sets, and if you haven't got those, you bring them in. And I think one thing that we were really good at was being aware of the responsibility we have, not just to our regional economy and the money that we bring into the region, which is significant every year, but also the impact that we have as a physical event as well on the town and the area. And we thought, you know what, we should explore out there to see if there's anybody we can work with. And luckily we managed to find an individual, Shona Lafferty, who's been working with us, and we co-funded the PhD that she's working on sort of economic and environmental sustainability. So, it's very much a Kendall co-funded thing with the University of Cumbria.
Wow.
And the outcome will be that she'll finish at the end of this summer. And the outcome is that we'll develop a toolkit, a sort of a values and a sort of carbon toolkit, if you like, to measure the event and the impact of the event. But we wanted it to be more than a sort of just a simple carbon measurement tool for an event, a physical event like ours. We wanted it to have a socio-economic overview. So we're looking at, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We did Belbin team roles for the team. We're looking at the sort of values-based principles for how we operate and the touch points we have in the business. So, it's obviously lots of different working groups, lots of measurement, of course. Carbon does come into that massively, but we wanted this little sort of toolkit or tool bag that, other events can use at the end of it, which would be fantastic.
And what did you find, whether it was through the PhD program or whether it's through just your own research, your own anecdotal evidence, are the big challenges to heading down that path of becoming more sustainable in every sense of the word?
Yeah, we've already made changes at the event, just looking at plastic use, use of water, we're looking at power generation. The tricky thing for us is that we're not sort of a one package event that just moves and sets up like a big music festival, which would be easier to control. We're working with multiple venues, working with a town. So we have impact and influence, but sometimes it's slightly out of our control. So again, this is where the PhD, the toolkit will come into play, because we can then go to the local councils and say, look, actually, this is probably the best way to do this. These are the best practices we've done. This is the measurement from the research that we've got. We strongly recommend that we take this approach. And in the same way that the brands are looking very closely at what we're doing as far as work with people like yourself, talking about science and environment and sustainability and education, as we mentioned earlier, is also very important to us.
It is my favorite time of the year when I get to come to Kendall and we have a massive schools day where thousands and thousands of kids come in throughout the entire day. It's obviously before COVID, and just have the best. We have like bunches of speakers who do wonderful and weird adventures. I talk about the science of it all, but people talk about literacy and society, and it's just a really fun day I feel like I don't know when that started. I feel like I've always done that. So it's always been, obviously the next generation has always been a thing that Kendall has felt strongly about. Yeah,
I think it was great when we first met, and I think it was a meeting of minds, wasn't it, where we both had the passion. And in the back of my mind, I always had a thing that I wanted to do with young people called The Science of Adventure. And obviously it's something you'd already thought about, you were working in, and it was like serendipity, wasn't it? It was like, oh, well, we could do this on stage. And honestly, I think it's probably the most life-affirming, uplifting event of the whole festival for those. In fact, the public don't really get to see it, do they? Because, we pack it full of school children and their teachers, up to 1,000 kids in each day, more. And the energy in that room is just electric, isn't it? And they're so... You get instant feedback with the kids, don't you? If they're not interested, they'll show you, but if they're engaged, they shout and scream, and credit to you pull it off fantastically. And for me, it's part of our outreach. You know, as an organisation, we look at how we can touch younger generations and maybe get people more aware of outdoor that maybe wouldn't normally engage with it. So we're looking at different areas of communities to maybe introduce it through guest speakers, through science and education, through film, and it's making a difference. You know, we're getting teachers and schools ringing us up, going, "Is the festival happening this year? Can we come and take part?" You know, it's already on their calendar.
And I suppose when talking about sustainability, climate outreach, and the rest, that's one of the best ways to do it. Is I'm really seeing a shift, in a generational shift. We interviewed two wonderful young athletes, Seb Salisbury and Katie Brazier, recently, and it was just at the forefront of their minds before they'd even started. And you know, Killian was saying that it's not always been a thing that he's thought about. It's not been something that I've always thought about. You know, I was a climate ambassador for the British Council from about 20 years ago. But before that, you know, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. So nowadays, kind of bringing it to the forefront of Kendal Mountain Festival and it being a big part of it, it must mean a lot to the outreach team, to the athletes as well.
Yeah, I think, no, absolutely. And you know, the young activists, like you were mentioning, the people there, the platform we've given to young environmental activists is important. And I think we also have to address, well, you mentioned the athletes, the influence that the athletes have is massive, and it's brilliant. The whole Athlete Academy, the Athlete Climate Academy is a fantastic innovation, and I think, you know, we'd love to be able to host that at Kendal. But actually coming back to the younger generations and they're our future. And I've got to say, one thing that's really important is that they're actually really worried. You know, we have children. You know, we've got kids at university, we've got a kid at secondary school. You know, generally the younger generations are super worried. They're super nervous. You know, probably more than our generations are, in a sense, because they know what's coming. They see what's happening in the world, and you know, it's up to us to be optimistic, and I think to give them security and positivity going forwards. And I think that's the job that we play, both of us, in our different roles, is to say change is possible rather than we're all doomed, because you know that's very easy to pick up on when you look at the news and see what's happening climate-wise around the world. And of course that's happening, but you know, I think the younger generation need to be listened to, as Greta Thunberg would advocate.
Yes, for sure. So going forward then, Kendal Mountain Festival will run again this year. It'll run again next year, which I'm very excited about. Obviously, you're making some changes. With COVID last year, it was remote. Do you think you'll keep any of that model and mix it into what it is going forward? Does that help with your sustainability targets at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were blown away by the response to our broadcast festival, the online festival. So much so that we're about to launch a new website, which will have a new Kendal channel called Kendal Mountain Player, which will be a 24/7 content on demand, if you like. But that'll be a subscription model, which keeps our business going, because as you can appreciate, running a festival of this scale is hugely expensive. You know, just to make it break even is a massive challenge every year, which we do. But you know, I think we need to look at other models of income to keep our team of 12 people in jobs. And I think that's, you know, very proactive of us to think about the platform that we're creating and talking about things like this and education. There'll also be the tours. And obviously the festival. So that's the development we're looking at. So the digital shift really increased our audience. Definitely took us on a global platform to 82 countries, doubled our audience at least. So I think it's only going to become more and more prevalent going forwards. So the whole Zoom interviews with athletes from maybe North America, I think will continue. I think there's a lot of people probably won't travel as much this year, but I think it's still important for people to come and see their heroes at Kendal. So it's just getting the balance right. I think that's important.
The the atmosphere at Kendal Mountain Festival and the conversations you have and the people you meet and everything else, it really does drive. It really does kind of inspire me to kind of go off and do better and do more work. And I don't think we're ever going to stop kind of meeting people and like being at festivals and this and that. But it's heartwarming that even though you say, right, we've got an impact, like we said, every manufacturer, every festival is going to have impact of some sort on carbon, on plastics, on business, etc. But you've got a roadmap now. You've got a roadmap to say, right, we're going to continue to do this. People find it a positive experience. There's more to be done. So what are the big challenges going forward for the industry that we're going to find that, we want to see festivals carry on. We want to see people, we want to see these kind of events, but what are the big challenges going to be, do you think?
Well, I think the challenges, multifold really. I think the challenges for Kendal are the sort of increase in scale. There's only so much we can grow. We've had an increased demand from brand partners. So the industry is very, very important to us, as is the media industry. And you mentioned that networking effect. Kendal is a huge hub for networking, whether you're athletes planning on new expeditions, new projects, new film projects, your brands who want to check out potential new ambassadors, filmmakers who want to look at new techniques, or activists, environmental activists who want to talk about issues to them and the work that they're doing and diversity and all the rest of it. So the challenges are sort of managing the growth and keeping it, as we mentioned with the PhD, sustainable. That's always a challenge because you can't just exponentially keep growing and growing. The challenges for the industry, I think, I think where Kendal is unique is that we offer the brands that unique opportunity to engage with the end user, the consumer, if you like, the person that they're selling to, but also to talk about their innovation, their sort of ethics, their values, the science behind a lot of their innovation, and their environmental credentials as well. And I think that doesn't happen anywhere else. It's not an industry to industry, a B2B trade show. It's actually a B2P, business to public trade show, which is very unique. So I think that's really important for them, especially in the digital world where most people are buying online now. It's a unique opportunity for people to get face to face. So I don't think I would ever take that networking opportunity away. And I think the influence that we have is massive because, if one brand sees another brand talking about sustainability and about, outreach and about sort of pledging support for, underrepresented groups, then the other brands do take notice. I've seen that shift. And then they make changes. So, that for me is a really important factor within what we do. But to manage Kendal, I think the key for us is finding right partners. We're growing globally, so we've got partners in just about to sign a contract in Australia, New Zealand, and maybe North America. It's looking possible, definitely with China, and obviously that comes with complexity, but we've got a fantastic team of people there. We've been working in China for 6 years, and I always believe it's better being round the table to have an influence than shouting across a wall or through a window at somebody who you think is doing the wrong thing. I think get in the room with these people, start talking to them and say, look, this is what we do. We think this is a better way of doing things. And then, you're going to have much more success doing that.
I completely agree. And, one of the places where, you say about the brands kind of taking note of each other, that's the kind of competition that I like to see, in that, let's all be better and let's push each other to be better. And, there's one thing there's certain people that I trust just to do the right thing. And no matter what they're doing, no matter where they're doing it, I just trust that they're going to do the right thing, and that's you guys for me. So hopefully, I really hope to see you at Kendal Mountain Festival in November.
You will,
in some way, shape, or form. I hope that it goes on. Steve, thank you so much for taking part in the Athlete Climate Academy and being with us.
Thanks, Hugh, and I think it's great work that you guys are doing with the Academy, and hopefully we'll be able to platform it at Kendal and share these incredible stories that you're platforming.
I hope so too. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Cheers, mate.
It was very good to hear Steve talk about that, and especially the networking, how together we can create and these collaborations and these pushing each other to do better and helping each other to do better. I think that's something that we should learn to do more, not to keep for ourselves, but to be able to share the knowledge and to share what we know, and not say I'm better, but just to say like that's what I do, and if it can help you, here it is. I think that's a very cool cool thing to do, to share.
It's really easy just to sit at home and hate tweets to people and like look at companies and what's happened to the world. And genuinely, there's been some scary stuff happen this year in terms of climate. It seems that every other day there's a flood, there's a fire, or there's something happening, and that eco anxiety can really build up. But it's one of the things we're trying to do with the Athlete Climate Academy, and hopefully one day we can do these live and actually network and get athletes and scientists and everyone in the room together and start networking and start, like you say, helping each other and lifting each other up, not just kind of tweeting at each other across the airwaves and criticizing each other. You've said before on this that you're an optimist and you want to help people do things, and you've got a platform to do it, and I've got a skill or two that I can use to help people with that. So I hope that we can, through Athlete Climate Academy, we can help athletes become more confident to talk about climate and biodiversity and environment and everything that goes with it, and help each other to move forward, to have that conversation.
Exactly, and that's important. As you mentioned, like many times we feel scared to talk about it because we don't feel that we are confident about our knowledge, or we are not being perfect. Nobody's perfect. First is the first thing that we need to assume, and not be afraid about the criticism, but because it will be anyway, it will be. But to have the base, so we are able to speak and to have to have this knowledge, so when we talk, like we feel confident about what we are talking. And that's why we are trying to build in this Athlete Climate Academy. And that's our goal, like from myself, from the Kid Engineer Foundation, like to bring the sustainability and to the climate conversation to everybody, so everyone feels comfortable to talk about, and then it's easier to convince other people, and it's easier to start to do small actions and to push it. And it's also what you are doing in a big way with the Antares education, with all the amazing materials that you are producing.
Yeah, I mean, that is something we're trying to do, like running. I'm sure, as you know, like you've got so many hats on, that you're an amazing athlete, but also you've got the foundation, and you've got kids, and you've got a little farm. I know that Emily looks after that a lot, but like there's so many hats that you've got to juggle. We do the same. Like I do commercial videography, I do education stuff, I do podcasting and all these other things. But I feel like what we've done the last couple of months with the Athlete Climate Academy goes a long way to start to. It's been fun, is what I'm trying to say, and it's important, but it's been fun as well to kind of talk to all these knowledgeable people about things that they want to do more stuff. They want to do good stuff, and we've been a lot of kind of late Friday nights talking to these guys, and you get back in from training and then jump in your van and talk from the back of your van. So it's been a labor of love to get this up and running off the ground. But I tell you what, it's not the last one. We can say that for sure.
Yeah, it's not the last one. Actually, I was going to say that now we will take a small summer vacation, let's say. So we are back on September. We are preparing an exit date for September, where we have been having conversations to talk about the weight on the events, about our renewable energies, about a bunch of stuff. And we are here also to answer your question. So if you have any subject that you want us to talk, if you want us to find an expert on some specific field, you can go to the website, to athleteclimateacademy.com, and you will go to the bottom, and there you can put a question for a scientist, and we will try to find that scientist and to answer to, so he or she can tell us what they know about this specific field. So I encourage everyone to go to the website and to ask the questions that they have for the athletes, for the scientists, sorry, for the athletes too. But probably the scientists can know a bit better than us.
But I mean, like this it's already a bunch of we tried to do kind of video podcasts as well as podcasts that you can listen to. They're all on there as well, and it's a bunch of great athletes that talk at length about their journey into activism, their journey into trying to make themselves better advocates for the planet, whilst also being very, very successful athletes as well. And I think we can. Every day is a school day. I'm a student of everything forever. I'd like to think that I'm always learning stuff, and I learn lots of the athletes that we have on, as well as the scientists too. But they're all up there. There's like 11 or 12 that are already up there, and we'll continue to put more out, I think, over the next couple of months. But we're going to try and do every 2 months to kind of do an update, because the climate's changing, as we know, the science is changing, we learn more things, and it's good to kind of always keep that coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So see you in 2 months. But for the meantime, go to the website. You can find, as you mentioned, like these interviews. They are both on YouTube and on podcast format. And you have like conversations about activism, about Antarctica, about the industry, about microfibers, about soil, about glaciers, about a bunch of stuff. So you can go to the website and jump into those conversations to learn a bit more. And it's not only that, like you have been creating a lot of great animations and a good toolkit of things, so you can use if you need to do presentations, if you want to teach in the school or anything. You have this stuff for you to use.
Yeah, the many lessons that we've been doing, all those animations are going to be going up into a Dropbox folder that you can download. You know, if you're an athlete and you're going into a school to talk about your journey, but also if you want to drop in any kind of climate stuff, then those animations will be free for you to download and put in. And there's a climate toolkit for teachers as well, like short experiments that you can leave them with, because you know, I do a lot of school stuff and then I wind the kids up and then leave at the end of the day, and there's nothing for the kids to do. So teachers need this help to talk about it as well. I know your mum was a teacher as well, and we have to support everyone in this. We're all in it together, right?
Exactly. As we mentioned, or you mentioned in the last conversation you have with Steve, is this networking, and it's like to help each other, like with the tools that we can have, each of us, and to put it out so everyone can use it. And that's the goal for us. And that's why we leave the website for the summer vacation, so you can go there, find and just go through all the materials that they are there, and see if you can use it somehow, if it finds utility on some of your activities. And then we come back in September to talk about what's going on climate science, and to meet a few more experts on different fields.
Exactly. Cillian, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful 2 hours again, and I'll see you soon.
See you soon. See you, everyone, and have a wonderful summer.
Bye-bye.